Okay, we are live and we'll be discussing upon the agreements of and touch basing on the different international organizations, their working stuff in terms of intellectual property rights. Because um, the way intellectual property rights has been treated over last, I mean, on the timeline we are in 2025. So first is like just post 2000, that is the last 25 years, and then from 1990 to 2000, I mean that decade, 1990 to 2000, is also very important, and it has to be understood in a manner where the current intellectual property rights can be embraced, which is not the case right now. And that is one, I think, in whatever capacity, I'm not representing any of the organizations or the governing bodies in which I play any kind of role. It's just my personal experience over the years of understanding intellectual property rights and the framework uh, which has been developed around different generative technologies. It's very, very important to understand that nomenclature, particularly in the year 2025 and beyond, just to get into the understanding of the sustainable development goals, which in many ways is not being achieved. And it's not that there's a lot of funding with the international organizations. That might be the case. That's not, I'm refuting that. But what is important is when anybody is using this portal, which is the World Wide Web, the task has to be performed in the offline world so that it has an impact in the online world and the white web can be created. Because we already discussed about it in different capacities, how the entropy, and the entropy always increases. That's how it is, and there's so much randomness. um, Given any kind of data set, what is important here is to understand that intellectual property rights, although it has loads of mirrors, one mirror is patenting, second is trademarking, third is industrial design, so on and so forth. The essence of intellectual property rights is to resolve the SDG goals. SDG goals is nothing to do with, um, in the literal sense, affordability. But what is important here is to look into the data set of how, I would rather say, there's deficiency of understanding technology in most of the folks, although they are using internet for whatever purpose, maybe communicating data from one person to the other, but the essence is totally flawed. And this flaw is multi-dimensional in nature. I was just going through some of the international videos where loads of people were talking about different stuff. But let me tell you, if you're not coming from a legal background, that means you need to have that 3 years proper law. um, I remember there was discussion, and still that discussion is ongoing, whereby, like, right now you have this 5-year law courses, at least in India. I'm not very sure about the other countries here. But what happens here is, in this 5-year law stuff, you are missing both the basic graduation subjects and law. I mean, it's in the air. I mean, it's totally in the air. Just saying A is A, that is not law. Law is all about the language of actuating wisdom, how wise you are with the understanding of a particular subject matter. And particularly, given the fact India is, and this India is not only a land, it is a country which has so many dialects. It's, I would say, it's a multinational country in terms of the dialect this country has, and that too, keeping it united itself is the biggest. victory for the citizens of this country in any way whatsoever. Citizenship doesn't mean that you have to be in the country only, because a lot of work has to be done at the international level. And citizenship is just one iota of data. That data has nothing to do with how things have to progress in the online world and in the offline world. But what is important here is to understand and embrace that this piece of land, which is above the equator, uh, it is very fertile, and there are a lot of things which are homegrown in this country in the offline world as seed, as crop. It has much more viability than anything else in this world right now. If I just talk about the planet Earth, I'm not talking about the other planets, because then we get into the quantum life, which I don't want to talk about right now. I just want to uh, re-emphasize on the life of individuals, the animal kingdom, the whole landscape of the food chain, which has to be embraced in whatever way it has to be. That is point number one. um, Point number two, whatever has to be done for achieving the sustainable development goals, there cannot be any agenda. You cannot achieve sustainability with an agenda. Sustainability is more to do with understanding the reality, and the reality is so many innovations have happened. So these innovations are not coming from India, let me tell you. These innovations happen somewhere in the world, and over the years, obviously trade happens. People visit one country to the other, and in this whole visit, you learn something from the other country, and you use it and develop a business around it. And that is what the trade related aspects are. However, what is important here is to understand that when we're talking about the chemical aspect, or we talk about the plastic pollution, I think I have been very vocal about it, in terms of the understanding that the biggest menace after the, or on the timeline, I still need to see and confirm whether plastic came into existence first, or it was the um, all these weaponizations, and all these any kind of chemical reaction which was misused to take over any country. So coming back to the point here is, plastic has penetrated in the food chain, and there's so much research everywhere. And right now the world is seeing a drift. It's not a shift, it's a drift. And this drift is nothing to do with intellectual property rights. This drift is that nature is the biggest blockchain, and what we can do in whatever capacity we are is the question the stakeholders need to answer. And rather than fighting against each other, particularly at the stage where it's Rajya Sabha or the Lok Sabha, what is important here is how we can mitigate the current situation and just try and revive the current menace. It's not just the job aspect. The real aspect is the sustainability of this planet, which is at SWOT analysis right now. I believe this was something of uh, where folks can ponder upon and look into the aspect of how the GIs, which is geographical indication of each and every place, and particularly the GI, I would rather say, if you just, if you just have the land, or whatever the mapping is, in terms of, four zones, where we have the east zone, west zone, north and south. Even in these four zones, if we are able to identify the geographical indications and just, work on it from the terms of, India has the manpower, nobody is questioning that. But is the manpower being empowered by the stakeholders, is the question the government needs to answer. That is where the stakeholders need to discuss and work on the ground level, rather than, building their own castles somewhere in the world without even leveraging the understanding of what intellectual property rights is all about. Thank you for watching out the video. Have a great week ahead.